We're back with Joshua Boone. He's a Metro Court candidate for Division 8. We have a lot of judges that come through here, a lot of candidates, not judges, some of them sitting judges. So the idea is for the viewers to get to know you.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why we're discussing all these things that we're talking about, and then you guys inform them with a lot of things that they don't know about.
Right.
And there's a little bit of encouragement there for somebody who wants to run for a judge. Okay, so we were at law school. You went to law school, you graduated, and then you started
I started
public
at the
defender?
Yes, I started at the public defender's office. I worked there for about 2 years. Worked initially in their Metro Court division, so it handled predominantly misdemeanors, DWI cases, most domestic violence cases. And then after about a year, I transferred over to their felony division. And I started there about 7 months.
How do you get into did you actually apply for it? Did they ask you to join them? Or?
I applied to be a public defender. While I was in law school, I was lucky enough to do an externship with their office. So instead of having to do classroom work, I was actually, as a law student, under supervision of another attorney, in the courtroom, working cases, trying jury trials. So I kind of had a good working rapport before I applied for the job.
Okay.
And got very lucky with it, had a great boss, Tom DiMartino, talked to me when I got interviewed. Wonderful individual, hired me. Loved the experience. It was a wonderful, wonderful job.
So what sort of cases did you handle? You right off the bat, you were handling things like DWI? And
Mostly
like that?
DWIs and mostly domestic violence cases.
And you don't get to pick it, right? Naturally, being
You do
public
not get to pick your cases when you are an attorney at the public defender's office. You are assigned to cases and you just go with what you have.
They bring a whole lot of files and say, here you go?
They do. I mean,
Exactly
the
how it
office is completely overwhelmed with cases, and the attorneys that are working there, I mean, they are working as hard as they can. It's, you get paid for a 40-hour work week, but most of those, most of the people who are working there are working well over 40 hours and really trying to do the best that they can.
And then how many cases can you take, like up to say 5 or 10 cases at a time, or is there a number there? Or?
There were days when you'd look at your case files and you'd have 20 to 30 cases at a time.
And you have to kind of juggle between them because they all have different court dates and things like that.
Oh no, that was just for that particular day.
Wow.
You would,
So
it was
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. You have to prep. You have to be really good on with time. But at the same time, you also have to remember that even though you're dealing with potentially 20 to 30 people in one day, in one morning or one afternoon, you have to take the time to sit there and talk with each and every one of them to make sure that they feel that they're being represented to the best of whatever ability you have. But also because this case is still the most important thing at this time to this individual, and you have to remember that. It's not easy, but most of the judges that we worked with in it, especially when I was in the public defender's office, they really understood that, and they didn't really press you to try and get that done as soon as you can. They really wanted you to be able to talk with all of your clients.
Do you think it needs, as far as the public defender's office, do you think it needs a little bit more of a different kind of exposure? Because a lot of times you look at it like, oh no, these guys are overworked, and they have so many cases there, and they're working on a lot of cases, so they're not going to defend me properly, or do you get that?
I think it would be wonderful if the public defender's office had a lot more exposure. Because there is a lot of sentiment to where...
You know how they portray that on television sometimes.
People
that, these guys are overworked and they don't have any time to really spend enough time with each and every client, so they're like kind of going through them.
And if you see kind of the stereotype that public defenders carry is, well, they're overworked, they're sloppy, they don't really know as much, they're not as experienced as a prosecutor, which is completely untrue. They're just as experienced as a prosecutor. They're just as overworked as the prosecutors as well. And everybody's trying their hardest that they can. But yes, more exposure for them would be great, just to really see how hard it is.
The prosecution side always gets a lot of light there. I think somehow we see them differently. And I don't know what that is, but maybe you can explain that, what that perception is. You think
it's the law and order effect.
Okay, because prosecution stars always looked upon like they're actually feared upon. They're like feared, like, well, there's the prosecution, Here's a public defender, so he's he's defending a zillion cases there, and he's going through them. But that's a good experience for someone to have when they come in.
It's a great experience. It would almost be impossible to find that kind of practical experience especially courtroom experience, and learning how a courtroom really works, how jury trials work, what arguments.
So would you recommend that to incoming lawyers?
I would recommend it to all incoming attorneys. If they have the opportunity.
Versus practicing on your own, like opening up an office or joining up with another team there.
Opening it, yeah. If you really want to be a really good trial lawyer, getting that kind of, you can't buy that experience with the public defender or the district attorney's office.
Because initially some of the other guys that are they're working with other lead attorneys there, they get a lot of hands-on experience in the courtrooms and things like that, but it's a little different, right?
It's a little different. I mean,
I think they're nurtured a little bit more.
They're nurtured a little bit more.
They're protected a little bit more, right?
They always have somebody, senior attorney kind of looking over their shoulder, making sure that they're doing things. With the public defender's office, they gave you the training that they had, and they basically said, go.
So do you have someone that oversees it? Like
you have a team supervisor, and the team supervisor is always great in the sense that if you're unsure, you just don't know, you can always go ask somebody. When I worked there, at least, it was very cordial. Everybody really was on the same team.
Do you guys help each other with the different cases? Or?
You would help whoever you could help. If you got done with your docket early, you would just walk the courtroom and make sure that the other public defenders were doing as well.
So, and how does it work when you are, say, you're working with the judges? Is there a good understanding that this is a public defender versus an actual defense attorney? Is there a difference there? How do they? Not really.
I don't think so. I mean, I think most of the judges do a really good job thus far of saying, you know what, we're going to treat everybody the same.
So they're pretty fair individuals.
They're supposed to be.
Supposed to be.
And I would say a majority of the judges are, in fact, very fair, and they don't care whether the person is a public defender client or a private client. And like anything in all situations, you see things that aren't the same like that.
Correct.
And there's certainly judges that don't treat things like that.
Now, what happens if someone says, well, I don't like him as a public defender? So what do? They just pick someone else? Or do they have a choice in that? Or
The judge will allow them if they don't like you as a public defender. Some judges,
legally, they can actually
ask and request for another attorney.
Different counsel.
Right.
Okay.
So hopefully generally they'll assign maybe somebody else in the public defender's office.
And I'm sure that happens though, right?
It is bound to happen. I don't.
Well, they don't get along with you because of various reasons.
Variety.
Maybe you remind them of their uncle or something, or it happens. I'm sure it's we're living in a world.
It's happened to me on more than one occasion.
Yeah, and so that would be the one part of it. Okay, so let's move forward, and then so far, how long were you in public defense?
Almost 2 years.
And then for 2 years.
For 2 years.
And then you went into private practice.
I went into private practice after that. So I started my own solo practice back in 2006, I believe. Yeah, 2006. So I've been in private practice since that time.
A lot more lucrative, I'm sure, right?
It's
well, that's what
definitely a little
that's what
more
my friends tell
lucrative
me.
than yeah.
Yeah, so that's what they all tell me. I have a few friends that are lawyers, and they say, well, it's a lot more lucrative. But then they still had the passion for public defense or prosecution or whatever.
Right.
I often ask that to prosecution, if you were to go into defense, why not? I mean, there's a lot more funds in there for you, and so they say, well, I kind of like being a prosecutor.
Right.
The money's good, and money's fine, but at some point.
Well, and money can't buy everything.
Exactly. Yeah. So that kind of leads you into what your current position you're in. You decided you wanted to run. This is after many years of private practice, right?
Yeah, this is 8 years of private practice now.
So you decided you wanted to run for judge and stuff, right? So how did that come about? Was there anything specific, or you just kind of felt like it's time, or?
It kind of felt like it was time, and I think everybody kind of goes through that experience where you suddenly look around and you're no longer the young upstart, lawyer with the potential in the courtroom. You're now the older guy that all the younger guys are looking at and asking the questions to, and it comes down to just kind of what you really want to do. And I mean, I guess my belief behind it is just I like helping others.
Yeah, well, you have to be. I think you have to be, number one, fair, extremely fair to be even want to be a judge. I think. I mean, if anyone felt that they couldn't be, if their beliefs got in the way or something, it'd be pretty difficult to go and be a judge. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
That's one key there that I always get from talking to candidates running for judges. We're going to take a short break.
Okay.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll take a short break. We'll be back in 2 minutes.